Thank you for that beautiful introduction. Before I get started with the talk, I just wanted to point out this website here. So if you do have more questions following this talk, please go to cannabinoidclinical.com. It is a website that is run by my company, but it is totally unbiased, meaning you're not going to find data and stuff about our drug. What you are going to find is, a good collection of evidence-based research in cannabinoid science, in epilepsy, outside of epilepsy, in all sort of disease areas. So please visit that website if you want to learn more. Okay, so as Elizabeth mentioned, I am from Greenwich Biosciences. We are the company that makes Epidiolex, which is the FDA Approved Cannabidiol. It is approved for Lennox-Gastaut and Dravet syndrome, seizures associated, with Lennox-Gastaut and Dravet syndrome in ages 2 years and up. I'm not going to be speaking to you today about Epidiolex for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's totally unethical for me to do so, right? I work for the company. I don't want to be seen as promoting the drug or a product to you. What I am going to talk to you about is the science of cannabis and cannabinoids, right? There's a lot of questions about what's CBD, what's THC, what's the difference between dispensary products and the products I see like at Whole Foods or I've even seen it now at like CVS and Walgreens. I'm seeing CBD oil, so sort of what is that whole landscape about? And I will mention a little bit about epilepsy and some of the stuff we've seen in epilepsy. Unfortunately, again, I can't share a lot of data with you on cannabinoids in epilepsy because most of that data is data that my company produced. So again, that would be me promoting the drug. But I can, if you have questions, I can answer them one-on-one, but not in this large group setting. But if you have questions for me afterwards specifically about that, we can talk about it later, okay? All right. Oh, I hit the wrong button. Off to a great start, okay. So when we think, can you guys see over there? You guys are like all the way in that corner, okay. So when we think about cannabinoids, right, when I say the word cannabinoid, what I mean is the components of the cannabis plant, right? THC is a cannabinoid. CBD is a cannabinoid. But there are actually 3 different categories of cannabinoids, right? Most of us, when we think about, cannabis, we think about the plant-based compounds, right? The cannabis plant. Endocannabinoids. So your body actually has an endogenous system, meaning your body actually makes chemicals that are very similar to components found in the cannabis plant. You have a whole system that does this. It's called the endocannabinoid system. And then you can also have synthetic cannabinoids, So these would be cannabinoids that be produced in a laboratory type setting. I'm like, I don't have enough hands.
Do you want me to advance slides?
Huh? No, I got it. I'm going to do this. I like to talk with my hands, so it's like I'm up doing this. Okay. So I mentioned to you a little bit about, the cannabis sativa plant. That is the main phytocannabinoid. And I mentioned THC and CBD, right? Those are 2 cannabinoids. Anyone have a guess how many cannabinoids exist that have been identified so far? Just yell out a number. 20, 60, 1,000, I heard. So those are good guesses. There's actually 104 that have been identified up to this point. CBD and THC are really the only 2 that we know about. They are the most abundant in the plant, so that's why we know the most about them, but that's it. But you actually have other ones like you may hear CBDV, THCV, CBN, CBC. They all have very kind of similar acronyms, but there are over 104 that have been identified. Beyond that, there are about another 200 plus chemicals called terpenes that are found in the cannabis plant. They're what give the plant its smell. However, we believe, or actually we know, that some of these terpenes actually have biological activity, meaning that some of them, when you ingest them, actually have activity in your body. And then beyond that, we can find all these different things in the plant. So when you talk about the cannabis plant, the 2 plants are never the same, right? Any one plant is going to be a vast mixture of all of these things. And most of the time, you're not even going to be able to identify what all of those are, because some of these are very hard to identify, especially some of these cannabinoids that are found in very small quantities in the plant. So is cannabis a medicine? So, we believe, and I think a lot of scientists believe, that the cannabis plant contains molecules that can potentially improve the symptoms of disease. But again, like I just said, there's 500 plus molecules, chemicals, whatever you want to call them, in the plant itself. And we really only understand 2 of them again. So let's look back at the history. I mean, the medicinal use of cannabis goes back really far, right? The Chinese were using it, long before anybody else. It really wasn't until the 1840s when a famous Irish physician named William O'Shaughnessy, he was traveling through Asia, and he saw that they were actually using cannabis for pretty much all of the things you can imagine they'd be using it for. Pain, mood problems, sleep, all the things we kind of hear it being anecdotally used for. And he actually saw that they were using it as an anti-seizure medication. Right? They didn't know what epilepsy was, but they knew what seizures were. And they were using it to treat seizures all the way back in the 1840s. He brought it to the New World, and eventually we see it showing up in 1851 in the U.S. Pharmacopoeia. So the U.S. Pharmacopoeia would have been the book of all the medicine at that time, right? There's only one book on all the medicine, and it's that book. And we also see it showing up in Merck's manual in 1899, which would be like your physician's desk reference of the 1900s. Merck, not just a company, but also a man. So what happened? Right? In the early 1900s, we're using it medicinally. People love it. We're growing hemp. We're using hemp for industrial reasons, paper, those kinds of things. What happens? Well, the same things that always happen in America. Let me just put those up there. So what we see happening is that in this time here, right, you see this whole blank space. We're using cannabis medicinally. We don't really understand it, but we're loving it. Then around the 1940s, we get the Hemp Act, which effectively prohibited the use, the growing and the use of hemp. So why did this happen? It really happened, the main reason is money, right? Again, like I said, typical reasons, this is America. It happened for money reasons. So at this time, hemp is being grown widely. It's being used for paper and rope, all of these industrial reasons. The two most rich and powerful families in the United States at this time are the Hearst family, who owns all the newspapers and all the paper mills, and the DuPont family, who just invented vinyl. Right? So they're very threatened by hemp because it's cheap, it's easy to grow, you can make cheap, easy paper, fibers, ropes out of it. They didn't like that. They put a lot of pressure on the US government to increase the tax on hemp farmers. And what this basically did was it made it so made them so expensive for them to grow hemp that they just stopped doing it. And they weren't just growing it for industrial reasons, right? They were growing hemp for cannabis. They were using cannabis recreationally, they were using it medicinally, but it became so difficult to grow that they basically just stopped. Then what we see happening is a lot of fear coming in because of the recreational use of cannabis, right? All this fear that people are bringing this into our country, that people are using it to get high. We see movies like Reefer Madness, if anyone remembers that or has seen the old things on that coming up, and people get scared. Then during Vietnam War, Richard Nixon is very anti-cannabis, and he's also very anti the war protesters. And what are the war protesters doing? They're smoking a lot of cannabis. So you make cannabis illegal, you put all those people in jail. Look, there's nobody protesting the war anymore. So we have all of these things happening at once, and because of Richard Nixon, we get the Controlled Substances Act in 1970. So the Controlled Substance Act made marijuana completely illegal. So what the Controlled Substance Act, a direct result of the Controlled Substances Act was the creation of the DEA. It did not exist before that. And what happened is you see this scheduling of drugs that happened. So these different schedules mean the higher the schedule, meaning it means the more illegal it is. So cannabis is in Schedule 1 with LSD, ecstasy, and heroin, and it still exists there today. Another thing I want to point out is, anybody know why it's spelled with an H right there? I mean, how often have you ever seen it spelled with an H, right? And how often have you seen it spelled with a J? All the time, right? The J spelling is actually the Spanish spelling. And the US government adopted that, again, to scare people. It's coming in from Mexico, they're bringing in this drug. The H is the English spelling. If you look it up in the dictionary, it's spelled with an H. Look at this first drug in Schedule 2. So remember, these ones in Schedule 1, no accepted medical use, high potential for abuse. Look at the first drug listed in Schedule 2. That's true. Cocaine is a Schedule 2 drug. Schedule 2, anything from Schedule 2 to Schedule 5 can be a prescription medication. And if you notice the examples here, you probably see some prescriptions you're familiar with in some of these schedules, right? Diazepam, clobazam is a 4. Briviact, pregabalin, Lyrica is a 5. So you can have prescription medications that are scheduled from 2 to 5. A Schedule 1 drug cannot be a prescription medication. Okay? Let's look a little more closely at this. So again, here I have the different spellings for you: cannabis, marijuana with a J. Now the Farm Bill is going to change some things, and the Farm Bill it just got signed into law this year. I don't want to talk a lot about it because we still don't know everything that's going to happen with it. But basically what the Farm Bill is trying to do is trying to exclude hemp from being a Schedule 1 drug. But again, we don't know all the legalities of that yet. If anyone, though, is out there telling you that now all hemp is legal and all CBD from hemp is legal, that's a lie. That is not true. The laws on this are still being worked out. To this day, marijuana is still a Schedule 1 drug. It is still illegal on the federal level, no matter if you have it in your state or not. Okay? So that's what the restrictions have put on it. The biggest restrictions, I would say, and the things that I think most people are upset about, is a Schedule 1 drug is really hard to do research on. People are always like, well, why don't we know anything about cannabis? And, you know, Big Pharma doesn't want us to know, and nobody's doing this. No one's doing it because it's extremely difficult to do research on a Schedule 1 drug. You have to get a license from the DEA. You have to get these big safes. You have to build in multiple layers of security, and you have to pay for all that. And the DEA can just show up anytime they want if you have a Schedule 1 license. So it makes it really hard to do research. There's only one institution in all of the United States where research cannabis is grown, and it's the University of Mississippi, the last place you'd probably guess. And that's still true today. So we do have some prescription medications, though, that are FDA-approved cannabinoids. So to be an FDA-approved drug, right, to get FDA approval, that means you become a prescription medication. And to do that, you have to do what we call placebo-controlled trials, right? Randomized placebo-controlled trials. I don't know if anyone here has ever participated in a clinical trial, but basically, if you are part of a trial, you don't know if you're getting the drug or if you're getting the placebo, and your doctor doesn't know either. Like one person knows that's got a list that's not even connected to you. So you don't know what you're getting, you report your results, and then they compare it to the placebo. And if it's better than the placebo, maybe it'll get approved. So these are the only ones that exist today. There are 3 synthetic THCs. They've actually been around for a long time. Dronabinol, Nabilone, or I guess Syndrose and Marinol are both Dronabinol in this one. And those top 3 are approved for cancer and HIV. They're approved as antiemetics, so you don't throw up, and they're approved to help you eat, because there's a big problem with wasting, with not eating in these areas. And then the only other one that's approved is our product, like I said, Epidiolex, which is a plant-derived CBD. And I already told you what it's approved for. And then you can see the scheduling. So because these are prescription medications, even though they are cannabinoids, they got rescheduled because they got good data. And then the DEA and the FDA rescheduled them. So what is cannabis now? We're kind of in a weird place, right? In the 1996, California was the first state to have medicinal cannabis, and then it's basically been a free-for-all from there, right? California, Colorado, we now have 9 states that have legalized recreational cannabis. Canada just legalized recreational cannabis. They're not that far from us. And we have 30 states now that have approved medical cannabis. But like I said, it is still illegal on the federal level. It is a state-by-state thing. But there's nothing stopping the federal government from coming into a dispensary in any state or place that's giving it out and shutting it down. Well, actually, there's probably one thing stopping them. They don't have the money to do it. So, unfortunately, though, even though your state might have medical cannabis, and we have medical cannabis in Pennsylvania, it's not subjected to the same safety standards that pharmaceutical products are. It is, if you have medical cannabis, it's up to your state to regulate it. It's up for the state to decide how they're going to regulate it, who's going to do the testing, and some states are better than others. It's not subjected to any agricultural safety or pesticide standards like typical crops. Okay? So like if you go buy apples at the store, there's very specific regulations about what you can spray on those apples, what kind of pesticides you can use. That is not true for cannabis. It's not measured in prepared food. So I don't know about you guys, but in New York City, the coffee shop next door to my building has like CBD lattes. I don't know how much is in there. I don't know what it is, but it's not measured. And it's not subjected to any labeling standards like alcohol or something like that. So what was it like before the FDA? I don't think anyone in this room is old enough to remember what that was like. I don't remember when the FDA was created, but it was a long time ago. So before the FDA, and you think about sort of old-timey, medications, and we hear the word snake oil thrown around, and you see the old movies where the guy's going town to town selling his snake oil and then leaving town with your money and it doesn't work, right? So that was kind of, that was obviously a glorified version of what was happening. But before the FDA, there was no one on the federal level that was regulating medicines, supplements, vitamins, anything like that. You could sort of get away with stuff, and people got hurt. So another thing I want to point out is that, like I said earlier, is cannabis a medicine? There may be parts of it that have medicinal value, but I don't know that you can call the plant itself medicine. Like I said, the plant, any one particular plant could be a combination of over 500 things. And you don't know what's in there because it's extremely hard to sort of test and figure this out. This is a real wordy slide, I'm sorry, but it's in your notes. But I just want to go over a few things here. So in 2017, so just a couple of years ago, the National Academy of Sciences found that, even though we're using more cannabis and we're changing, state level policies are really changing. Like I said, we have 30 states now, that have approved or that have legalized medical cannabis. We still don't have any conclusive evidence, either short or long-term evidence on health outcomes, on benefits, on harms, of any of this stuff. So we really don't know. A lot of it, well, pretty much all of it, all medical cannabis, if you're using it, if your doctor's recommending it, they don't know what to tell you to take or to do or how much to take. You kind of have to figure it out on your own. However, what we have seen is that the marketing of this kind of stuff has become increasingly more aggressive. And that's just because, as the federal government's sort of not doing anything about it, more and more companies are sort of taking hold and sort of jumping into the game. I mean, this is going to be, I think it already is, but billions and billions of dollar businesses. We do know, though, that marketing cannabis or any cannabinoid treatment for a disease or a medical condition requires FDA approval. So if you do see companies out there that are making these medical cannabis products and they're making medical claims, that is illegal. So it may be legal in that state for them to sell it, but if they're saying this is going to cure cancer or this is going to, get rid of your headaches, that's a medical claim, and that is totally illegal, and they should not be doing that. So here's the state. Here's where we are as a country. I think this is up to date. I think, what was it? Michigan was the last one. Yeah, Michigan's up there. So Michigan was the last state to legalize recreational. What we see now, we have all of these states plus Washington, D.C. that have legalized recreational, all of these states with medical marijuana. And then so those states at the bottom, you're only allowed to have medical CBD. So in those states in the middle, you can get products with THC, and those states at the bottom, you can't. You can't get any THC products. Let me take a drink of my water. Let's talk about a few categories here before we go any further. So like I already mentioned, I showed you the FDA approved cannabinoid medications. There's 4 of them. Like I said, they can be plant-derived or synthetic. The biggest difference here is that if they are FDA approved, that means they are controlled by the FDA, they are controlled on the federal level, and they are held to the same standards as any other prescription or over-the-counter medication that you may take. What is medical cannabis? How is medical cannabis or medical marijuana different than recreational marijuana? Can you use the same strain medicinally as well as recreationally? What did you say? Who said that? Yes, you can, right? There's medical, there's potential medical benefit for THC. You could use a high THC strain medicinally. So really the only difference between these two things is your intent for why you're using it. I showed you there's 3 synthetic THCs that are FDA approved, right? So there's medicinal purposes for THC. So really medical is you're using it to alleviate symptoms. Recreational, you're using it for recreational reasons, for pleasure, for relaxation, for whatever. To get high, I don't know. What's hemp? Is hemp cannabis? Is hemp cannabis? Anybody? Yes, it is. Hemp is cannabis. They are the same thing. A lot of times you'll hear people say, that there's 2 parts of cannabis. There's marijuana and there's hemp. and that cannabis is sort of up here. I use cannabis and marijuana interchangeably. I think a lot of people do. The legal definition of hemp is it's a cannabis plant that contains less than 0.3% THC by weight. And in case I failed to mention, because I just assumed that everyone knew this, so excuse me, THC is the part of the plant that gets you high. So I just want to make sure that's clear to everybody. Excuse me if I skipped over that. Generally, hemp, though, is also low in CBD. Most hemp is grown for industrial reasons. That's the original reason why hemp was grown. It wasn't grown meant to be consumed. It was meant to be grown as fiber, as paper, as for industrial, for feeding livestock, etc. But now, with the Farm Bill, it will become federally legal to grow hemp, but that will be regulated by the state. Again, Pennsylvania, if they decide to let people grow hemp, they will regulate who can grow it, how much they can grow, etc. It's not like everybody growing hemp now is in the clear. So I talked a little bit about some of the testing regulations. So like I said, if you're an FDA-approved product, you're held to what we call good manufacturing practices. So any pharmaceutical company that's making a drug out there, they are held to good manufacturing practices. So that means every pill, every liquid, everything they produce has to have the same, it has to be exactly the same. It has to have consistency from each batch, from each dose. It has to meet good clean practices depending on where it's grown. If it's produced in a lab, if it's a plant, etc. Medical cannabis is not like that. It is the state. So the state decides what kind of testing they're going to impose and who's going to do the testing. If you want to find out about Pennsylvania State, just go to the Department of Health. Go to the Department of Health website, and they have information on there about what kind of testing they require and who does the testing, etc. But in general, these are all the kinds of things, kinds of cannabis testing you could see being done. So potency, meaning how strong is it? How much THC is in there? How much CBD is in there? Are any microbes, pesticides that you're spraying on the plant? Residual solvents. So this is one, so if you're getting like an oil, or if you're getting a tincture, a mixture, something that's not, just a plant in your hand, they use some sort of solvent to make that oil, to make that tincture, to make that mixture, right? So are you making sure that there's not any residual solvent left? Heavy metal testing, this is one I'll get to in a minute here. I'm going to skip over that. And then aflatoxin testing. Aflatoxin is a liver toxin. So let's talk a little bit about the heavy metal stuff. So I like this picture over here, hemp sucks. What this means is that hemp is a phytoremediator, meaning that it actually draws heavy metals out of the soil. Now there's a lot of plants that do this. This isn't unique to hemp, but hemp happens to be a very good one. In fact, farmers used to use it to clean their fields, to get all the heavy metals and the garbage out before they planted other stuff. So if you're getting a CBD product or whatever kind of product from hemp, where did they grow that hemp? What did they spray on that hemp? Those kinds of things. So like I said, there's 47 states that have some law allowing the use of medical cannabis, right? 30 that you can have THC and the other ones CBD only. Only 23 states have testing requirements. I will tell you that Pennsylvania does have testing requirements. Delaware does not. Delaware has none. I know we're not that far from Delaware, but Pennsylvania does. Only 20 of these states test for content beyond cannabinoids. So meaning, some of these states are just saying, okay, how much CBD is in here, how much THC is in here. 20 states are looking at other things, like maybe it's heavy metals, maybe it's bacteria, fungus, those kinds of things. But a lot of states actually exclude hemp products from testing altogether. That may change slowly over time with the Farm Bill, but right now, that's kind of where we are. Because again, like I said, hemp has traditionally been grown for industrial purposes, not for human consumption. And CBD products that you see out there may be using substandard hemp. Like I said, this is quickly growing to be a multi-billion-dollar business. And what happens when demand goes up, right? Usually quality kind of goes down sometimes. So like I mentioned, like I said, natural cannabis can be contaminated. These are just some examples here pulled out from some different states, looking at what they found in testing. This one here in California, 5 cancer patients that were using medicinal cannabis got an infection because of mold and fungus that was in it. Here's this one in Michigan, finding things like yeast, mold, chloroform, things like that in the cannabis. So imagine if you're smoking that's going directly to your lungs. which a lot of, traditionally, a lot of people that were using medical cannabis were smoking it. I think that's sort of changing. More people are using oils and ingesting and things like that, but it's still dangerous. So I'm not going to read all these, but you have that in your handout if you want to read some of these examples. So beyond that, beyond some of the testing and things like that, like I said, for the heavy metals and things like that, some other things to consider are mislabeling. So if you go out there and you get a product and it says it has 30 milligrams of CBD, is that accurate? And a lot of times there's no way to really know, especially if you're buying it, if you're not getting it from a dispensary, you're getting it on the shelf, like at a health food store or a drugstore or something like that. There's also issues with stability. And I'd say one of the biggest issues I hear people talk about is dosing. How much am I supposed to take? Oh, it says take a dropper full. What does that mean? So there can be a lot of issues about dosing. And also, we just don't know. Like I said, there's only 4 approved cannabinoids that have had good clinical research. For any other reason, nobody knows how much to tell you to take of anything because that research hasn't been done. You have to be your own guinea pig, unfortunately. And I would say another big one is adverse event reporting. So this one I love, and I'll talk about it for a minute. And yes, I know I work in pharma, I'm biased, but when I hear people say, oh, it has side effects, why does your drug have side effects? Cannabis doesn't have side effects. Well, the companies that make these CBD products, they don't have to report adverse events. If someone takes their product and they get sick and they complain to them, who do they tell? There's no one they need to tell. If somebody gets sick on our product, we have to tell the FDA, or at least we should. We are, but we have to tell the FDA, like, hey, some people got sick. Okay, we have to watch out for that. Or some people had this reaction. Okay, we got to watch out for that. But these companies, these dispensary companies, things like that, they have no one, they're not reporting this stuff to anybody. So if other people are using that product and getting sick, you may never know until someone comes in and shuts them down, if enough people get sick. So this is a study I like to point out. This was published in the Journal of American Medicine. This is a very high respected journal in 2017. What this group did is they took all these cannabinoids, these CBD oils that you can buy online, that you can get from dispensaries, and they looked at how accurate the labels were. And they looked at oils, tinctures, which are like mixtures, they can be pills and things like that, and vaporized liquids. And the green means it was inaccurately labeled. So 55% of the oils, 75% of the tinctures, and 87% of the vaporized liquids were labeled inaccurately, meaning that they had more or less CBD in them than what the company told you they had. And you'd think, obviously having less is a problem, but also having more CBD than you think can be a problem. If you're trying to take a specific amount of CBD and the oil you're taking has more CBD in it than you realize, now you're taking more than you thought you were. This is another study that was looking at the accuracy of labeling. And so I just showed you the last one, which was all about CBD. What this study here did is they went to, I believe this was in Oregon or Washington, one of those, I think it was Washington State, where they have legal medical cannabis. So what they did is they took some different strains that had both CBD and THC, and they sent them to 6 different labs across the state. And they said, okay, these labs tell us how much THC is in here, tell us how much CBD is in here. So the problem here is that, sometimes the labels, like I said, are inaccurate, but also the labs are inaccurate because the labs aren't used to doing this. They don't really know, they don't have good standards to sort of figure this out. This is the same strain of cannabis. They sent the same exact strain of cannabis to all 6 of these labs. Lab A said it had this much CBD, and Lab F said it had this much CBD. This is the same plant. Lab A said it had that much THC, and Lab F said it had this much THC. So even within the labs, in the same exact strain of cannabis, across 6 different labs that are good quality labs, it's just hard to figure out. So even if these things are being tested, the labs are still figuring out how to do this. Up until this point, most drug testing, THC testing, has just been yes or no. It hasn't been, give me a level of THC, give me a level of CBD. It's mostly just been like for employment, things like that, like are you on drugs? And what are the impacts of unknowingly ingesting THC? So maybe you think you're using a CBD oil, and it says it has this much CBD in it. It may potentially also have some THC in there and you not know it. That has happened. So some side effects of taking THC, you could exacerbate certain mental illnesses or mental problems. You could have cognitive impairment. THC can be proconvulsant, so it can actually make your seizures worse. And then employment. If you have an employer who does drug testing and you're ingesting THC without knowing it, that can be an issue. So I'm going to skip over this. So this was just the FDA sent out some warning letters, like I mentioned, for inaccurate labeling. If you go to FDA's website, you can look up all the different companies they've sent warning letters to. You'll find that. And that, again, is inaccurate labeling, but sometimes they send warning letters because companies are making false claims. They're saying this will cure your cancer or whatever, and they can't do that. And then in terms of epilepsy, specific to epilepsy, when you hear about CBD is becoming kind of hot in the world of epilepsy, but things you need to be considering are dose. So if you are using a medicinal CBD or an over-the-counter CBD, dose matters here. And this was a case report, or 2 case reports that were just published in Epilepsy and Behavior last year. 2 cases of SUDEP in 2 young patients who self-directed, quit all their medications, and started taking CBD oils that they bought themselves. Okay, so this can be very dangerous. Obviously, this was self-directed. Their doctors did not know they were doing this. Their doctors did not advise them to do this. But because it's available to you and it's just over the counter and it's so easy to get, this is what doctors are afraid of. Medication compliance can already be a problem. And then if you think, well, this is the way to go and I'm going to do it, it can be very dangerous. So think about that. Also, when I hear things like CBD or cannabis has no side effects, that's not true. It's a drug. It's a drug just like any other drug. When you put a drug into your body, it's going to have some sort of effect. If you look at, general side effects across our studies, across other things that have been reported out there with CBD, these are the general side effects you see. Somnolence, GI symptoms, nausea, vomiting, those are more CBD related. In terms of THC and CBD, you see some people having THC can increase anxiety, it can increase seizures and things like that. So a lot of times CBD and THC kind of have opposite effects. Not always, but where CBD is more, decreases anxiety, THC often increases anxiety. CBD, may decrease seizures, whereas THC sometimes can increase your seizures. I'm going to skip over this because it's a lot. So basically, the whole point of this was I just wanted to show you that, CBD and THC, like I said, they are kind of opposite in terms of their effects, and THC is generally, more the one associated with getting high, with the recreational uses, but THC can have medicinal uses. However, THC and CBD do have some overlap. These are just some different areas in the brain where they're attaching, and I just put this in here for the medical people in the room so they can sort of have this information because they know what these are. So they do have some overlap. Beyond that, I like this slide because, if you ingest medical cannabis or cannabis in general, recreational or medical or otherwise, it's attaching potentially to all of these places in your brain and body. Okay? When you ingest a drug, any type of drug, it has to attach somewhere in your body to have its effect, right? If you've ever read any of your prescription labels that you get with your drugs, the big label, there's a section in there that should say mechanism of action. A lot of times it says we don't know because a lot of companies don't know. But occasionally you do see, this is how it works. So that's where it's attaching in your body, and cannabinoids have potential action in all of these different places. So, this is a lot of times where side effects come from. You're taking it for one of these reasons, but then it's also attaching in all these other places. I'm definitely going to skip over this because this is a lot. I'm going to get to the stuff about specific to epilepsy. So like I said, I can't talk to you about the clinical data that's been done because it's the data that's been done by my company. But I can show you a little bit of some preclinical, some animal work that sort of led to why we thought CBD would be good. So like I mentioned, in animals, so remember this is all done in animals, THC has been shown to be anticonvulsant, but it's also been shown to be proconvulsant. So THC, like I said, THC and CBD overlap on some of the areas they attach to. So this might be why sometimes it's anticonvulsant, but then other times it can be proconvulsant because it has some unique properties to it. However, when you look at animal models with CBD, it's almost always anticonvulsant, and the ones where it's not anticonvulsant, it was just neutral. So there's never been any animal studies showing that it increases seizures. And so this is why a lot of times with epilepsy, you hear us talking more about high CBD strains or CBD isolations. And then there's a few other, like I said, there's CBD and CBDV and THCV have also been looked at in animals. These are two other cannabinoids that may have some potential, but we know a lot less about these. All right, the last thing I wanted to talk about was drug-drug interactions. So there's the last couple slides on there. Again, I'm not going to go over those. Those were kind of more for the medical folks in the crowd. But these are things I want you to think about if you are considering medical cannabis or if you're using it. Number one, make sure your doctors and your healthcare providers know that you're using it, even if they don't agree with it. Because there are potential drug-drug interactions that can happen. If you're on multiple medications and then you add medical cannabis, it is not benign. It is metabolized by your liver. In fact, it's metabolized by the system that metabolizes over 60% of prescription drugs on the market today. So when you take that, if you're taking one of the drugs in that 60% and then you add medical cannabis, you could have potential drug-drug interactions because now they're metabolized by the same systems. That's where drug-drug interactions come from. And so this is what the point about medically fragile or vulnerable populations. These are people that are on multiple medications. And a lot of times some aggressive marketing has been made at people in these groups. Typically with medical cannabis, we've seen it more in cancer and chronic pain and things like that, but it's going to start ramping up in other disease areas. So this was the slide I included for the medical people. So this was just showing you where it's metabolized. So this enzyme, these P450 enzymes, like I said, this system metabolizes about 60% of the drugs that are on the market today. And it also metabolizes CBD. So all of these ones here are affected by CBD. And then if you're on drugs that are also metabolized by that system, you can have potential drug-drug interactions. So this one here, this 2C19, this is a big one for CBD. CBD is really strongly affects this enzyme. And this enzyme metabolizes contraceptives, antidepressants, proton pump inhibitors, other anti-epileptic drugs, all of these other things. So these are things you need to think about if you're on multiple medications, not just epilepsy medications, but anything. It also interacts with clobazam, which is a common AED. And then the last one, this is the second one that it metabolizes, and again, here are all these sort of effects here. So you can read over that. Again, that was a little bit more of the high medical stuff. So the last slide here is, what are the potential solutions, right? Well, I would say rescheduling, right? Getting it out of a Schedule 1. If we get cannabis out of a Schedule 1, it'll be a lot easier for more people to do research. Right now, you have to have a lot of money and time and patience to do this research. But if we reschedule it, more academics and smaller people with less money, less resources could start doing some of this research as well. The Farm Bill is a step in the direction, but it's a very small step of what needs to happen. And I also think that the FDA will continue to try to limit CBD and THC sort of to medicines only. You've seen some of that now in New York City. They came in and they said you got to stop putting CBD in all the food and the coffee because there's no regulations, so they pulled it all out. But not all states and cities are doing that. I was just in Philadelphia last week and I saw it everywhere, advertised everywhere. CBD coffee, CBD, water. I mean, if you know anything about CBD water is just insane. So, it's becoming everywhere. And I think that is my last slide. So I'm sorry if I went a little long, but I am going to stick around if anyone has any questions. Does anyone have any questions they want to ask to the larger group? Like I said, if you have any specific questions about Epidiolex, I can do those one-on-one after I'm done speaking. Yeah?
I've heard the ratio of CBD to THC in the product. A medical person told me it should be like 20 to 1.
20 CBD to 1 THC?
Yeah, okay. But when I went to the dispensaries here in Pennsylvania, they were just selling 1 to 1, 2 to 1. So we didn't try it.
Yeah.
Because is that a
right.
20 to 1? Is that
well, so again, we don't know. There's no evidence to support 20 to 1 or 2 to 1 or anything, especially in epilepsy. But one thing you have to watch out for is if your doctor gives you, it's a recommendation, not a prescription, right? They can recommend something. But then when you go to the dispensary, if they don't have what your doctor recommended, they're going to try to sell you something else. It's not like if you go to Walgreens and they're out of your drug and they're saying, oh, just take this drug. It's the same thing. That doesn't happen. But that's what they will do. So you have to watch out for that. I mean, I would recommend to try to stick to your doctor's recommendation, if you feel like there's a valid reason why they're recommending it. But again,
doctors don't want to even talk about
right. A lot of epilepsy doctors won't talk about it, again, because I showed you that paper with the 2 cases of SUDEP. That's what they're nervous about, is that people are going to think it's a miracle They see these people that have had these miracle responses. They think it's a miracle, it's natural, don't fall for the natural, thing. And so they're going to stop taking all their other medicines and just switch to that. But again, 20 to 1, 2 to, we have no idea.
Yeah, we didn't go that way
Yeah.
because it just didn't seem right.
Did anyone have, I thought I saw a hand up. No. Anybody else have any questions? Yeah.
The support group just gets the information, and the amount of people who just say, "Oh, I'm just quitting all my drugs and I'm just moving to this," and like it blows my mind.
It's
that
very
you
frightening.
Just stop everything that you've been counting on your neurologist or whoever for years or whatever. You trusted them, and then all of a sudden somebody says, "Oh, this is good," and everyone's like, "Okay, I'm going to try it." Like, I mean, I asked my doctor. I asked her what she thought about it. She gave me her opinion, and I respect her because she keeps my child alive.
Right. Yeah, they say don't fall for Dr. Google, right?
Yeah.
And don't fall for the naturalistic fallacy, right? This idea that because something is natural and from the earth, that it's better for you. And like I said, you hear people saying like, "Oh, well, it has no side effects." Yeah, because again, that company is not collecting side effects. They don't care. They have no. They're not beholden to anyone, to the federal government, to report any safety issues with their product. So they're not doing it. And if anyone's out there telling you that a CBD product has no side effects, it probably has no CBD in it.
I've been at 2 seizure appointments over a couple of years back, and I told them both, I said, when all other triggers fail, and I know I'm having a seizure, I told them both to smoke 2 or 3 hits of marijuana, go to bed, and that cures it. You thought I had the scarlet letter on. No, don't even put that in my chart for one phone.
Yeah, I mean,
I said, okay, don't put that in the chart then. I'll just, from now on, I go in and say, all's good, all well.
I think that's loosening a little bit, but I would always recommend to people to tell your doctor, even if your doctor is not the one who recommended it to you, or if you're getting it not from a medical dispensary, to tell them. Because like I said, it can interact with your other medications. And if you start having some new side effects or some breakthrough seizures or whatever, your doctor's going to think, "Oh, your meds aren't working," and they're going to try to switch or increase. And maybe it's the cannabis that they don't know about.
Research on, like, I don't have to do that every maybe once a year. If I know all else has failed, and that works, do they have any reason on why that works?
No.
Is it the better sleep?
No, I have no idea. Honestly, like I said, we just don't know. I mean, but like I said, I would always encourage people to tell their healthcare providers if they are using it. I don't think, in general, hopefully your healthcare provider is not going to like I said, we have medical cannabis is legal in Pennsylvania, so especially if you're getting it from a dispensary or something like that, tell them. Yeah.
I just want to stress that you please talk to your doctor about it. We talk about this multiple times a week. I can't tell you how many times we answer questions about this, but it's very, very important that your doctor knows what you're doing. It may be hard for us to recommend something if we don't have great evidence behind it, but as you've heard, there's potential interactions with other stuff that's going on that they may be taking, so we definitely need to be in the loop. We can't help you if we don't know what's going on. The idea of stopping medicines and not letting your doctor know, or having things go on that you're not letting your doctor know, scares the bejeebers out of me, because then I don't know how to help you. Your doctor can't help if we don't know what's going on. That's all we really want to do. So please always, always, always talk to your doctor about whatever's going on. We have what knowledge we have, and as a medical community as a whole, from the Epilepsy Foundation, Epilepsy Society, everything, sometimes that knowledge is limited because there hasn't been enough research in some things. But at least we can let you know what we do know, so that you can make the right decision with us in the loop to make sure that you're doing the right thing.
And I will say one thing I forgot to point out, medical cannabis has been around a lot longer for things like pain and anxiety and those kinds of things. It's existed a lot longer for that. So traditionally when you go to dispensaries, a lot of times that's what they're used to giving it to people for pain and for anxiety, which are, which are not they're serious issues. But in those issues, you can sort of dose to effect. Right? You can use the product until you're not in pain anymore. You can use the product until you're not feeling anxious anymore. They're not used to giving it for epilepsy. They don't understand, they don't get the idea of a seizure threshold, right? They don't understand that. And you don't always know where your seizure threshold is, right? Or you probably never know where your seizure threshold is, unless you're getting regular testing, from your doctor. So they don't really know how much to tell you to take, when to take it. And this is why a lot of, epilepsy doctors don't want to recommend it, because again, they don't know. And they are afraid that you're going to be non-compliant with your other medications.
one last thing, and then I'll be quiet for my wife. The other problem is, anytime I would mention that to them, even if it's once a year, I tell them, oh, we gotta up your dose, up your dose. If I hear that one more time, oh, you need more meds. That's all they will say in response to, no matter what it is. Two wouldn't even put it in my chart. They go, oh, no, that don't work. That's nothing to do with that. So it's like almost you stop talking, they don't get any, and I'm not angry, I'm just talking
No,
loud.
I understand.
So they don't get proper research because you just hear back, oh, you need more meds, you need higher dose of meds. I don't even think I'm on the dose of meds that they prescribe. It's the one that works for me though.
Well, I mean,
And I adjusted it, and like they don't even know, and they don't even really care. I hate to say it, but my doctors don't care.
That's not necessarily true. It really isn't. Like,
Yeah.
unfortunately, like, I understand, like, there are some doctors that prescribe. There are some doctors that really try and prescribe no more than 2 drugs. At least my neurologist does that. He doesn't want to put everyone more drugs. And unfortunately, they have to go a little high, because I will tell you what happens if you don't go a little higher than you're supposed to. You get a really bad seizure, like an hour long, and almost die in the bathroom. It happened to me.
that is what they're worried about, right? They don't want you to have a seizure. But I mean, I can't speak to your specific scenario, but you know, hopefully the things will change. And I even if your doctor's not listening to you, I would continue to tell them if you're using anything, you know, even not just even cannabis, if you're using supplements, vitamins, you know, you should always tell your doctor all of the things that you're taking on a daily basis. Any other questions over maybe on this side of the room? Anybody have any questions? No? Okay. Well, I'll be around, so if you have any other specific questions, you know, please come talk to me, and thanks for paying attention.